Well, I'm going to try not to cut my fingers off while I'm doing this. Picked up a new hobby here. Don't know if I'll enjoy it or be able to figure out how to do it or not, but I'm going to start working on some wood carving. You know, for years off and on, I've made turning blanks, carving blanks out of desirable hardwoods like this. This is cherry from a tree we had come down this winter. I've sold the blanks and the blocks on the internet, Etsy, eBay at times, whatnot. And I just, this wood is so pretty, and I thought, I'm not getting any younger. I would like to learn how to do some of this woodwork, and so I decided I'm going to start carving. So that brings us to this evening's story, which is creepy AF. You want to make sure you get my 6 while you listen. Just got really quiet. Except for that. So, I've got plenty of cherry around here to make my turning blanks with and to start my carving adventures. I wanted some walnuts, some black walnuts. So the last few days, I've been doing something that I call tree spotting. What that is when I'm out running or doing my mountain biking in the mornings, I just pay attention to what's going on around me and look for any downed trees. And if it's any sort of desirable hardwood like cherry or walnut, butternut is a good one for carving. Well, I'll just go ask the property owner if I can have the tree. I used to do it years ago. That's how I'd get my turning blank wood, and I've never been told no. A lot of times people say, if you know how to take one down, I got one out back, I want it gone too. Can't pay you, but you're welcome to the wood. Because that's all I'd say. Hey, I'll clear that down tree out of your way there for free, just in exchange for the wood. So I was out just a couple of days ago, and I was on my mountain bike, and I saw that there was this really big walnut tree that had come down in a recent storm. And black walnut is beautiful wood to work with. Looks like a rich dark chocolate. I thought, I want to have that tree. So now, where's the person that would own that tree? So I stopped there beside the road, and I'm way out in the country on a route that I do off and on. It's about a 15-mile loop by the time I start it and finish it. And there's a bit of an oddity out there by way of a church. Now, let me explain how this church out in the middle of nowhere here in the country is such an oddity. It has the appearance of being brand new. It looks as if it's newly painted every month. That's probably being exaggerative. It's probably painted every year, though. The lawn is always well kept, well manicured. It's got beautiful bushes, but there's never anyone there, even on Sunday mornings, Sunday evenings, and Wednesday afternoons. I know this because I've gone past it for the 6 years I've been out here numerous times during those days and during those times. There's never anyone there. And my first instinct has always been, well, it's just a defunct church, an out-of-business church. Because remember, like it or not, I mean, they are businesses. Not for profit, whatever, unless you're on the board or you're the pastor. Hey, just saying, and I'm not, I can only control what I say. I can't control how you take what I say. I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just being factual. I clearly heard a tree knock, so you keep listening and you keep watching. So anyway, I had never been up the quite lengthy driveway to this church, but I saw that tree, wanted to get a better look at it, so I ventured up the driveway. It's probably a quarter of a mile long driveway, and I got up there, and sure enough, just as it had always appeared from a distance, this church was clearly well kept, well taken care of, fresh coat of paint, but it didn't have a name. There was no name on it, and the sign out front where it usually has the hours of service not only didn't have the hours of service, the sign didn't exist. It wasn't there. So here's a church, no name, no hours listed, but I could smell the freshly cut grass. Okay, it's that time of year where we're cutting grass again. The grass had just been mown. So I look over, and sure enough, just at the edge of the woods, that large tree is there. It's walnut. Oh, it's so green, beautiful. Green as in, it just fell. The wood is still wet, moist, easy to carve and work with. So I'm looking, who would know who owns this church property? Well, off in the distance across the field, there was a house, and I saw that there was an old man sitting on the porch of that house, and he was watching me. He was probably a quarter mile away from the church. Well, my bike's a mountain bike, even though I ride on the roads mostly. So I didn't want to go all the way out the quarter mile long driveway, quarter mile up there. I wasn't going to ride 3/4 of a mile to go talk to this guy that was, 400 yards away over there. So I rode through the field, went over, and I said, "Excuse me, sir, I hate to bother you, but I do some woodwork type stuff, and I'm always looking for easy hardwood if I can get a hold of it. And I noticed that the church over there has this big black walnut tree that came down. And I was wondering if you knew who I could contact to ask permission to get that. I wouldn't charge him anything at all. All I want out of it is the wood, free wood for me and free, tree clearing for them." And he says, "I'm the person you'd ask about it." And I said, "Oh, are you the pastor of that church?" He said, "That church hasn't had a pastor in a century." And I said, "Well, that's odd because it looks like that church was just painted and somebody just mowed the grass." He goes, "Yeah, I painted it last fall and I just mowed the grass 2 days ago." And I said, "I'm confused. It's none of my business, but why so much work put into a church that hasn't had a pastor for a century? When was the last time they even had a service over there?" He said, "Oh, about 100 years or so ago." And I said, "So what gives?" He says, "Well, it's how it was written in the trust." And I said, "The trust?" And then, listen, I live in an area where there's a lot of wealthy people, a lot of trust babies, families whose grandparents founded a Fortune 400 company. So I just figured, well, okay, something to do with the land trust, no big deal. For this area, very common. I said, "Okay, well, since you're the guy in charge of the property, could I have your permission to get that walnut that fell?" He says, "You might not want it." And I said, "Why not? It looks like good wood to me." And he goes, "I guarantee you there's not a nut on that tree." I said, "Well, I don't care about the nuts. I just want it for the wood." And he goes, "There is nothing good can come from you taking anything off of that part of the property, and you need to make sure, should you decide to get that tree, you stay out of those woods." And I was like, okay, does this guy watch me on YouTube? Did he recognize who I am? And he's trying to tell me the spooky story? But he gets up, walks in the house, and I figure, well, free wood, black walnut, let's go back over there and get an even closer look, okay? So I ride my bike back over there, leave it there at the church, walk down over the hill to where this tree is just right on the edge where grass meets forest, right? Where the veil is thin. So I'm looking at it, and I get the sense that someone or something is watching me. And I feel like it's coming off from my left. So I just instinctively glance over there, and I'm looking out into the woods, and I swear I heard what sounded like a woman's voice, 4 words, say 4 words, and the first word she said sounded like she was about 400 yards away. The second word, 300 yards, 200 yards, and then only 100 yards away. Those words were, "Get off my land, get off my land." And so I instinctively turned right as quick as I could because it felt like somebody was like sprinting at me at the speed, with the speed of a world-class sprinter. Get off my land. I look, there's nothing there. And just in that very moment, I hear footsteps now on my left and a voice saying, "My land," almost like right there to my ear. So I turn and I look, and there's nothing there. So I back up slowly out of the, right there at the edge of the woods. I hadn't stepped into them just enough to get a better look at that treetop. See how thick the limbs were on that walnut tree? I'm backing out. I walk like almost all the way back up to my bike before I finally turn around. And when I turn around, that guy's standing there. He had decided to come over, I guess. And he'd gone in the house, not to walk away from me, but to get his Bible. He had it. He was holding it right here. And he said, "So you heard him too, did you?" I said, "I heard something. I'm not sure what I heard." And he said, "Well, I think you're pretty sure you did hear what you heard. You're lying to a man standing here holding a good book." And I said, "Well, if I told you what I honestly thought I'd hear, you'd say I was crazy." He said, "I'm going to tell you what you thought you heard. You heard somebody saying, 'Get off my land,' and then you heard someone else from the other direction yelling, 'My land.'" I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I heard." He says, "You don't think I haven't heard it? You don't think my family's been hearing it for more than a century, for generations?" I said, "Sir, you got some storytelling to do, and I want to hear it because my interest, my curiosity has been piqued too greatly right now to walk away from this and not know what's going on. And he said, I'll tell you the story, but if I do, you might not come back and get that walnut wood, you claim you want. So I said, well, I got plenty of cherry at home. And maybe hearing the story would be better than getting the wood. So he begins telling me the story, and the story is pretty simple. It's about 150 years or so ago. There was this big parcel of land that the old man, he descends from that family at one point that owned a couple thousands of acres of land, okay? So about a century and a half or so ago, there was another family that lived right next door to him that only had about 10 acres, and that family was the family of the pastor of that church. It was the pastor, his wife, and they had a beautiful daughter, very beautiful daughter, the way the man told me in the story. Wasn't a thing wrong with her at all, except the fact that she came from a poor family. Well, she was the same age, about 17 or 18, as the young man of the family that owned thousands of acres, who had just come from affluence for generation after generation. And he was smitten with the young lady. She was pretty, and he was a good-looking young guy. I guess they kind of liked each other, but his family wouldn't have it because she was just a commoner. Just a commoner. And their family wasn't going to take the risk of mixing blood with commoners because they were highfalutin. So it was a relationship that never happened, even though both people felt something for each other. But one summer, the story goes, the niece of the pastor came down to Virginia to visit, and she was from up north, and she was even prettier than the pastor's daughter. And when the people in the congregation saw her, they all were smitten with her, and the young man of the neighboring estate fell head over heels in love with her and pretty much forgot about her cousin. And the highfalutin family thought, well, at least she's from up northeast somewhere. She might not be rich, but at least she's not going to be a dumb southerner. Well, we guess, Junior, we'll give you permission to date this girl. We can give you permission to court this girl if you want. Well, he started courting her, and they just head over heels for each other real quick. And before you knew it, they were getting married. And they got married in that church, broke that other girl's heart. Broke her mom and dad's heart, too, because they knew that their daughter, loved that boy. But because of socioeconomic statuses, it wasn't meant to be. So I'd like to say that the man and the woman got married and lived happily ever after, but that's not what happened. They got married and all hell broke loose. Turns out that the reason the niece was sent down here that summer in the first place because she couldn't stay out of trouble up in the Northeast. And turns out, no, they weren't just, not a rich family, but you ever seen that show Ozark? It's on Netflix, I believe. It has Jason Bateman in it. They're money launderers. They go off to the Ozarks. Well, this girl could best be described as Ruth Langmore, one of the main female characters on that show. Just as cute and adorable as could be. You see her, sweet, petite, 30-ish year young woman, just until she opens her mouth. And then she is pure, unadulterated, redneck, white trash, hick filth. And if you called her that, she'd take it as a compliment. And if she didn't, she'd break your nose and beat your face off your head. Well, that's what old boy, from up the road here, 150 years or so ago, married. And she was fit to be tied. The family, I guess, was pretty influential. They were integrated into the local power structure. They were the types that, they want something done. They want a law passed. Well, you just call a congressman or a senator, have it done. Because you're the one that's putting the money, up for their election, re-election, whatever anyway. So, old girl got herself in a bit of trouble here many years later when that pastor died. And after the wife died, actually, pastor, then the wife a few years later. They were middle-aged by then. Turns out that this girl who had made this man's life for 20 years now of marriage just a living hell had starting to hear some strange howls coming from the forest behind me. Make sure you keep getting my 6. All right, so anyway, when the mother died, the pastor's wife, turns out that all of the land, the 10 acres, the church, and even the house went to the wife who had come down from the Northeast, because what she had done is she had suckered her way into the good faith and trust of her aunt and uncle, and in their older years, they signed her over as a power of attorney instead of their own daughter, because she had convinced her, look, I'm from an affluent family now. I'm not, lower socioeconomic now. I'll make sure everything gets taken care of in proper order, make sure that your daughter never runs out of money. Just, you got to make me power of attorney of all your affairs. And they thought, well, gosh, we don't have much affairs anyway. Let's just do it. Well, she signed their land over to her and the church. And it turns out she'd been doing this to other people in the community. But charges had never been brought against her because people were too intimidated by the power and the wealth of the family she'd married into. She'd stolen dang on near 1/4 of this end of the county. So her cousin, though, wasn't going to have it. She pressed charges, and there was a court case. But yet again, guess which family had influence with the judge? Yeah, you guessed it, the one with the money. So even though she stole that land from her cousin, she won the court case, and the cousin didn't get the land back. Well, sounded like a grunt and then footsteps just now. So anyway, the husband knew what his wife had done, and he just didn't know how he's going to live with himself about it. But to make matters worse, the day after the trial, the pastor's daughter was found hanging from a tree. She made the choice to take her own life. Yeah. And it gets even worse. The next morning, the wifey poo, Miss Ruth Langmore type, who wasn't as sweet and innocent as she looked, was found dead in her bed. No investigation was ever done, okay? And her husband fled the area, never to return. And when it was his time to inherit the wealth of the family's land and vast estate, etc., he never showed up to get it. It ended up, I don't know, some distant cousin or something put a claim to it. Government took the bulk of it to, redistribute all the wealth, as government likes to do. And I don't know, it got to where now it was dwindled down to where a couple hundred acres remains. The old man that was telling me this story now has it, as it's passed down from his family. I guess he was very distantly descendant from these people. But he said that a man out west claimed on his deathbed that he had been the man who had grown up on this vast estate here in Virginia, had fled because he killed his wife. He smothered her with pillows, and he said it was because she had killed a woman that he had first fallen in love with many years before, and he'd stolen her land, and she had stolen her land. She had stolen many people's land, and he just couldn't let her get away with what she had done. However, he wanted to get away with what he'd done, so he fled. He fled the area, went out west, and never came back. This story circulated, and it got back to somebody in the family who was a distant relative who got the land, somebody from whom the man telling me the story descended from. And they decided that, okay, they didn't know if there were any living relatives remaining of the family that had the pastor and his wife and the daughter who had taken her own life. But what they determined was that they were going to set aside like 5% of their family's annual revenues, because they sold timber, they had so much land, they raised cattle, hay, everything, all the stuff farmers do. 5% was always going to be set aside in an account so that if any descendants from that family whose land was stolen from them ever comes to reclaim it, they can have the land back, the 10 acres in the church, and the money that's been set aside. And part of the trust agreement is that fund will also be used to pay out a caretaker for the church to honor the woman's father who was a pastor. So the church, even though it hasn't been used for more than a century, is always freshly painted. The lawn's always well kept. Big black walnut tree fell down in it recently, so there's some cleaning up to do. What I will tell you, after my experience of just stepping almost into those woods, is that the old boy that lives next door can be the one to clean it up. I'm not going back after that walnut. I think I'm just going to stick to my cherry here. See you for more next time.